as we have just completed this opening prayer, I had surrendered completely into God's presence for being empty as approaching the call to seek and know what God desires to bring forth, not what Larry would hold within his mind. And one of the things that was rising, even as I was in prayer, and it was just coming forth in Aramaic, I'm opening this call without that prayer. The recording started after that prayer was complete because I want to edify the people that are listening to these recordings and those that have come onto the call that are not aware of this understanding. And I know that part of this is a repetition of months ago of something that I shared, but I feel it's really important for people to understand this so that this concept of prayer in different language does not shut people down or does not move people to start seeking the mind. And the best way to look at this is to really understand that an example I shared once when I was doing a healing service, and the ministers of the church had asked me to please teach on tongues because the people in the group don't really understand it, and they're always questioning what is Larry saying and all this stuff, because again, they're seeking Larry's words, the words that come out of my mouth. They're not looking to God within them. However, in this setting, there were people in that healing center, that healing service, that were seeking God. And what happened is at a moment in that service, and I know some of you have heard this, but please bear with me through this, but in a moment in that service, I was led to surrender and allow for a prayer to come forth in the Abun and what I heard within me was a beautiful prayer that came forth in Aramaic, and God gave me the wisdom to understand the nature of the prayer. That was not the fascinating part. The fascinating part was the three people directly in front of me were seeking God within them, not what was this Larry guy saying standing on their altar, but what was God guiding them in. And I know you've heard this, but one person heard it in Czechoslovakian, one person heard it in Japanese, and one person heard it in Mayan. And honestly, that is where I stopped trying to figure this process out. I stopped trying to do it intellectually. And what happens is many times when people come to listen to the recordings or they draw into the website and they want to listen to the recordings, they hear the opening prayer and they don't understand the nature and the direction of it because, again, they're seeking of their mind. Or they come in a guarded nature because somebody, one of their, worship brethren or something said, you got to go listen to this. And they come in and they're already guarded, because they're testing the spirits, which is a good thing. But the challenge is they're testing the spirits, they're testing the knowledge from intellect. What I've witnessed in most people in their reactions is they're honestly not seeking God. Because when I come to people that are not guarded or fearful, they find a peace within it even though they don't immediately grasp what's going on. They find their breath calms. They find that wisdom enters in. They find clarity begins to rise. Then they find revelation, and each revelation we release into the fullness of God's love. So please understand that when the tongues rise, it's not to measure what the words are that I hear upon the earth. It is to seek God within you, and you may hear it in a completely different language. You may even hear it in English. Do not be caught in the constructs of your mind or the limits of your ears. Allow for God's Spirit to honestly lay hold within you and trust that God's holy protection is over you. Whether you're going into a congregation of people and you're hearing people in the gift of tongues, or if you're hearing somebody in a state of prayer in a different language, you may be hearing somebody that's sitting down and they may be praying a prayer in Arabic, or they may be praying a prayer in Asian. They may be praying a prayer in Slavic. Who knows what that could be? But if you would seek God, not, oh, gee, I wonder what this person is speaking, or I wonder what language this person is speaking, that becomes intellect. One of the greatest hopes in my heart for every time I engage with people is that they would recognize the importance of seeking God in every breath, thought, word, and action. That includes those things witnessed, not just the things they're saying, but the words they hear coming forth from another individual. The thoughts that are extended within somebody's dialogue. Are you honestly submitting them before God in the fullness of grace, surrender, and the hope for divine discernment? And again, back to those 3 people within that healing service, which I forget how many people, there might have been about 30 people in this. We were separated from the main congregational area and into a smaller chapel where we did the healing setting, and there may have been about 30 people there. And to think that of that whole room, it was apparent that there were 3 people that were obviously seeking God in awe. They were honestly drawn to God's presence, and from discernment, they were able to utter the same prayer in English afterwards, but again, each one of them hearing it from a different language. And then it was at that same service where a woman came walking up from the back, and she handed me a book called Language of the Cosmos. And she said, I really feel, I want to share this book with you, because when I heard you praying, I heard Aramaic. And she started talking about how excited she was in the fact that she was actually hearing the living language of Aramaic that so many people speak to as a dead language, no longer around. Well, it's been resurrected over these last years, and this was now about 12 years ago. So at that time, it was really in its infancy of being reawakened and stirred back into public knowledge and public awareness. And quite frankly, I've had many people that have tried to come against me and tried to squelch this gift that God rested through me, and I've had a number of people within churches that have tried to malign and undermine it and tear it apart. But I can't, before the grace of God, I cannot before God myself resist the gifts. And I believe that there's even a place within Scripture that says that you are not to resist the gifts of God. So I would ask people to heighten and become vigilant. Not just what is it that God is doing through me, but how is it that I submit what I am witnessing before God? How do I relinquish myself to become that which is God within this moment, to understand what God wishes for me to learn, the form of edification that God wishes to rest upon me, and how will this manifest to reveal God's glory in a more powerful way? And one of the things I don't want is for this unusual practice, which I feel is actually quite usual and normal. I don't want it to become a place of alienation to people. So you'll notice that on many of the prayer calls, I've started in the prayer as I surrender to God, and that just automatically comes into tongues. When I submit before God, it's not my language, it's not my words. I feel a prayer form within me, and it just expresses off of my tongue. And again, what I've stopped doing is hitting the record button as that happens. And that is the blessing that I get to extend to those who come to the call. For the recording, I've had to shift to a place of immediately recognizing Yahweh's name and then engaging in the instructional process. Because if we're reaching into greater public areas, public media, all the different methods that we use now to reach people, it's my hope and my trust that it is God that will reach their hearts. But I've witnessed many times how people allow for intellect and fear to separate them from a message that God may be extending. And I will back up for just a moment to say that one of the first things that I said at that service was, please understand that every single one of you people, and that includes every single person upon this earth, has spoken tongues at one time in their lives or another. And the way I've described this in the past is to help people recognize that there are many times we come to situations and we are just beyond our depth. We have somebody in deep distress, deep need, problems rising before us, something happening beyond our level of intellect or something. And we just totally submit. We just, oh my God, what am I going to do with this? And we just stop and breathe, and we find ourselves responding to our friend or responding to the person in need, and we find wisdom that comes out of us that we didn't even know existed within us. It happens to be coming out in English, but I will restate again. That is the gift of tongues. You may be speaking your native language, but the wisdom that comes forth, you know within yourself going, wow, that's really amazing. And you want to write it down because you want to remember it. You don't even have to, but it is recommended that you journal it because it's in you. It's already there. It's in you. And if you do surrender and submit to God, even in a place where you just feel you're beyond your depth and you have no place to turn but God, once you engage in God, the message comes forth as God intends. And in that moment, you will be gifted through discernment. You will be gifted in tongue. And if that tongue happens to emerge in English, be blessed to know that God's Spirit has chosen you to pour through for the sake of somebody standing before you or somebody upon your phone or wherever it happens to be. This is not magic. This is not something I've gone and studied. This is not something you have to go study. It's something we surrender to as God's presence lays hold and expresses divine grace and glory through us. So now in that, I do wish to surrender into the fullness of God's love and prayer. To close this call, to bless each and every one of you. Yashua in Yelye on Yokoro Suyalomo Obre al mil conrio soshonye Avon yul cum yosu Onyere ashonyere amusurialo Avon Avonyere amutor conyere vietma Yalwilian Mirkon Yobu Avonye Yushalom Darakumye Avonye Yamusonyo Ova Hanye on Soriandra Homye Avonyelu Avlandala Hamuntu Kevria Aviesteliondra Kotoyu Nivia Kundrakomia, Vonyelius, Yahweh, we thank you that you deepen us within your wisdom. Expand us that we might fully manifest your presence in each and every breath we receive. We trust you above the thoughts of our minds or the witness of our day. We submit ourselves fully into your love, to recognize your holy name, Yahweh, Yeshua, Avun, Sotoria Medikitire, Elohim, Anarakura Susieviandrava. And I pray blessing upon each and every one of you that you would find a deep and holy rest within God's loving embrace and be awakened tomorrow, refreshed, renewed, and heightened in divine discernment for all that you witness, heightened in your ability to relinquish yourself completely and allow for surrender to manifest God's holy presence through you for the sake of each person you encounter. May your grace, healing, love you dearly, and look forward to the opportunity to serve you in the days to come. May you be blessed, filled to overflowing with God's love. So we praise our God in the holy name that is given. Yahweh, Yeshua, Abu, Danduri Esme, Elohim Alvaro Shakundaraviane. Amen.